And I'd also like to thank Lois Eisenhart, who couldn't be here with us today, but she provided Dorothy's harp and much of the memorabilia, the photos, and the artifacts. So this is a tribute to her as well. She was a longtime friend of Dorothy's and a student as well. All right, so first we'll do the PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll show a video that I had prepared for her funeral. And then we'll move to the middle section and do a little harp music. Many people referred to Dorothy as Miss Knauss. Her students all referred to her as Miss Knauss, no matter what age you were. And fellow musicians, friends, called her Dottie, and then the rest called her Dorothy or Mrs. LaCelle. So an only child, she was an only child, and she was born, can everybody see this? She was born on Church Street in Macungie to Effie and Nelson Knauss. And she's a descendant of some of the first settlers in the region. Johannes Knauss from Emmaus and Johann Romig from Romig's Mills along Spring Creek Road, if you're familiar with that branch of the family, were her ancestors. Her grandfather's brother was local historian O.P. Knauss, who wrote the history about Macungie, and he also published a newspaper, am I correct? Yeah. And her mother, Effie, was religious and was very involved in the church. Dorothy, on the other hand, always said, music is my religion. And her parents were very supportive of her interest in music and her career. Effie ran tours at that time and loved to travel, and her dad, Nelson, was the local justice of the peace. This is a really interesting photo I found online of the Aquila Knauss family, and this was Dorothy's great-grandfather. It featured the picture of O.P. Knauss here and O.J. Knauss, who was her grandfather, and the rest of the clan. I don't know how many of you have seen that before. Music studies. At age 6, Dorothy began piano lessons with her Aunt Alice Shingler of Macungie, who was also a church organist. At that time, when she first heard the harp, she thought it was the most beautiful sound she ever heard. So she was stage struck, and she decided that she was going to be a professional musician from that time forward. And so at age 13, she received her first harp and would regularly travel alone to Philadelphia on the Philadelphia Reading Railroad in a trolley to visit with her teacher, Dorothy Johnston Basler. And after a long walk to Miss Basler's home, Dorothy was greeted with tea and toast to sustain her through the all-day journey. She left at 5:30 a.m. So she was dedicated. And you've got to remember, women at this time are just fighting for the right to vote. And so this was a transitional time in our history. And for a 13-year-old to be going to Philadelphia is pretty amazing. Miss Basler's harp ensemble in Asheville, North Carolina, and at a harp convention with a large ensemble with 102 harpists were her favorite memories. In Carnegie Hall in New York, 102 harpists were all dressed in green and performed together, and it was a very big privilege to be asked to perform with the ensemble. She also studied with Alfred Holy. There's a picture of him on the left. He was from Austria, very famous harpist, and he was here for a short period of time in New England at that time, and so she studied with him while he was at the New England Conservatory. And postgraduate studies, she studied with Marcel Grangeny, and he actually was the person that most of us look to in the French method of harp playing, of bringing that tradition to the United States. So she has a wonderful pedigree with her training. And speaking of which, this is the harp teacher genealogy. You probably can't see it from here, but we can trace the teachers that Dorothy has had and their teachers all the way back to Christian Hofbrucker, who built the first single-action harp, which means it's the first one that had pedals, like the big concert harp. Now that's a double-action harp. The difference is the folk harp, like that one over there, has sharpening levers to change the tension on the sharps, for the sharps and flats on the strings. So you have a little lever you put up and it'll change it to half tone. And on a big pedal harp, there are pedals that you move and it moves like all of the C's at the same time when you press it one notch. And so it leaves your hands free while you're playing, so do your accidentals. It would be like the black keys on the piano. If that makes sense. And then the double action harp has two positions for the pedals, and I can explain that a little bit more later when we get over to that section. So this is an example of the Brian Boru harp from Trinity College. That was a medieval harp in Ireland, but they were basically that shape and size prior to that time they were used. Some of the early Gothic harps that were folk harps still looked like the one on the right, but they didn't have pedals. Okay. So on her 19th birthday, while studying at the New England Conservatory, Dorothy treated herself to see the student Prince operetta and fell in love with it. The following morning, while she was tuning her harp for orchestra rehearsal at the conservatory, a band walked up to her and said that the Schubert Theater was looking for a harpist because the former harpist got a year-round job at another theater. She was overwhelmed, but got permissions from her teacher and dean to perform 6 nights a week and 2 matinees if she kept up her studies. So when the company went on tour, she got a year's leave of absence with the proviso that she would return to complete her studies and during the final year. She did and graduated with honors. By that time, the orchestra's conductor was given another operetta, and Dorothy was asked to tour with the Blossom Time show. She was the only woman in an otherwise all-male orchestra, and they traveled by train to many major cities east of the Mississippi for 5 years. Imagine that. And the show closed after the Great Depression hit the theater very hard. Must have been an exciting time for her. So, Dorothy couldn't imagine what she would do after that. She moved back home and began to teach piano and harp lessons and performed wherever there was an opportunity. She also was the first woman in Macungie to drive a car. A real trendsetter. As Dorothy said, when one chapter closes, you don't go back, but you move on to the next one. And this was her philosophy through her long life. A new chapter opened for Dorothy in 1932 when Albertus Myers, conductor of the Allentown Band, asked her to become their harpist. Myers had been a cornet soloist and was a close friend of John Philip Sousa and wanted to emulate Sousa's band. So Sousa had added an elegant look to the symphonic sound by employing harpist Winifred Bambrick to tour with his band in 1920. In 1914, by the way, Bambrick had been the first harpist to record for Thomas Edison on Edison diamond discs. And so these were real trendsetters. Dorothy was a soloist with the Allentown Band on many occasions, and many generations of fans would attend the Allentown Band concerts at West Park just to hear her sweet tone and to see what type of glamorous attire she would be wearing. Also in 1932 was her marriage to District Attorney Joseph E. Geringer. They purchased their dream home, the Morning Call's newspaper's model home at 2953 Alton Avenue in Allentown in 1937. It became a renowned landmark in Allentown because of the large folk harp replica on the roof of her studio. Sadly, in 1943, Joe died of pneumonia just 9 days after winning his election as a Lehigh County judge. A chapter closed and another opened several years after Joe's untimely death from pneumonia in 1943. She met her second husband, engineer-photographer J. Burton LaCal, at Hook's Diner, which was also called Sailor's Diner, and now it's a Greek restaurant now. I can't remember. Jack worked for what was then Bell Labs in Boston, New York City, and Allentown for 43 years before retiring as senior engineer in Allentown in 1965. A well-known photographer in the Lehigh Valley, he was known as a professional amateur. Jack was past president of the Allentown Camera Club and won more than 25 Camera Club awards for his prints, which he exhibited at the Allentown Art Museum, Muhlenberg College, First National Bank in Allentown, and the Kemmerer Museum. Some of his photos are displayed here today. The beautiful picture of Dorothy in the other room and his photo are on the tower in the other room. Jack was previously a painter and had studied in New York City and was also past director of the Allentown Community Concert Association. He took many photos during their many travels and created slideshows with recorded narratives. This is before the days of videos. And they would show the videos to their friends in their basement rec room that he remodeled. Jack had also created a photography lab in the other half of the basement. They were married 41 years and had no children. Dorothy's career came first, and she said that she never regretted that decision. She could help other people's children to grow and then send them back home to their parents. The picture on the right is some tile work that Jack had done in their basement floor. So it was a little memory for those of us who used to visit the basement to look at the trowel logs. Dorothy maintained a busy schedule, performing as a soloist in her Knauss trio and as principal harpist with the Allentown Concert Band for 67 years, the Allentown Symphony Orchestra for 34 years, and the Allentown Municipal Opera Company for 56 years. She taught more than 500 piano and harp students. She performed in the Knauss trio with Bertold Wawrak on flute and his brother Paul on cello for 36 years. They played for many of the Greater Lehigh Valley's high society functions, and she was often featured in newspaper articles. At the age of 13, Bert had become the youngest flutist for the John P. Sousa Band and then became the first flutist with the Allentown Band. My first harp lesson was in 1982. I had always fantasized about playing the harp but never had the opportunity. So at age 28, I was recently divorced, a nurse and a cardiac cath lab technician, and was living in a third-floor apartment. I had studied piano for several years as a child with Dorothy Musselman, which is pictured up on the upper left, and really missed playing music. So one day after hearing a recording of harp music, I decided it was time to fulfill my dream. So I set up a lesson with Miss Knauss, who lived only 10 minutes away, and her welcoming, sunny smile and positive attitude melted my feelings of inadequacy. As we entered her studio filled with 3 harps, 2 pianos, photos of her students, and tons of harp figurines, I was transported into a world of beauty that changed my life. I sat down behind her golden harp, which is over there, and was ecstatic after plucking just a few strings. And I knew that's what I had to do the rest of my life. And no matter what, even if I could only play a song or two, by the time I was 90, I was sold. So she arranged for me to rent a harp from one of her other students, despite others' comments about this being a crazy idea. And everybody knew you had to start as a child, that's what they said. And, you know, you couldn't do this. This was in the early 1980s, so it was just a crazy idea. So I began weekly lessons as well as a lifelong friendship with Miss Knauss. There are many good memories about Dorothy and her stage advice. Always the proper lady image was important to her. Her students were advised to pay attention to the whole picture. Proper stage deportment was stressed. Keep a poker face and make your mistakes with confidence. There are many, some of her students who began lessons as young girls remembered that they had to wear their Sunday best dresses to attend lessons to show respect for the instrument and the teacher. Nails were manicured short and painted pink. Some requirements were relaxed over the years, especially for adult students. However, a student who was scheduled to perform was given advice, and sometimes Dorothy would loan gowns or accessories to make sure that the student made a professional appearance. Dorothy would consistently recommend pink nail polish, a sparkly barrette or comb added to an updo hairstyle, gold shoes, a colorful floor-length full skirt or gown, and a female harpist should never wear slacks to perform. She said, men like lace. her waist-length hair up in a chignon, and dressed professionally with lovely clothes, jewelry, makeup, and heels, even at home when she's greeted her students for lessons. I couldn't believe that when she was 90, she would still be wearing high heels. She welcomed her students she encouraged her students to be versatile. By the 1970s, a new generation of folk harp builders and performers created a resurgence of interest in the harp. Also, pedal harpists were no longer restricted to classical repertoire and orchestra setting. They performed at restaurants, jazz clubs, corporate events, weddings, on cruise ships, and more. And they played many genres of music. So Dorothy made sure her students were prepared for any occasion and were able to reach a larger audience. Most importantly, she always recognized and appreciated when music was played from the heart, and said that it was something that could not be taught, but could deepen with maturity. Ms. Knauss was very proud of her students and generously promoted their endeavors. She would keep a list by her telephone of students who would be ready to perform, so that she could immediately refer them for performance dates that she was unable to accept. In 1929, Dorothy had attended a lecture presented by Norman Vincent Peale in New York City. She said it changed her life, and from that day, she embraced the power of positive thinking. She lived that the rest of her life. Dorothy had an extensive doll collection from her worldwide travels. An exhibit of her dolls was featured at the Allentown Library in 2012. She also had a collection of over 300 harp figurines and ornaments, most of which were placed on her Christmas tree, and Lois Eisenhard used to put them on the tree for her. Dorothy also loved cats and had a white Persian named Cleo. So that's the symbol of Nibbles up there in the picture. The legacy of her sweet tone continues through her students, including several who have become professional harpists, orchestral harpists, recording artists, and harp teachers. If you can see that, Suzanne Thomas played with the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra for years, and Carol Thompson, you might know of her, she lived in Bethlehem and is a recording artist. Connie Harding is with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, and Sue Moll took over the Allentown band position for Dorothy. Rhonda Smith played with the U.S. Air Force Band, and so a couple other professionals on there. So she had some good outcomes with her students. Ms. Knauss was special to so many people. These are notes that were written after her funeral, but people put it online, so I thought it would be nice to commemorate their thoughts. Ms. Knauss was so special to so many people, many piano and harp students, Allentown Symphony members, Allentown band members, municipal opera members. Throughout the years of her musical life, I studied with her for 6 years, from 1965 to 1970, until I went to Eastman School of Music. She will be missed. That was from Connie Harding from Hawaii. Susan Albertson wrote, Miss Knauss was my piano teacher in the 1960s. I remember walking to her beautiful house with the harp on the top for lessons and her beloved cat Cleo lounging about the music room as I played. One of the many things I have to thank her for is encouraging me to patronize the Allentown Community Concert Association, of which I'm still a member today. Adrian Nash says, when I was a young girl, I watched Miss Knauss play harp and organ duets with my father. She reminded me of an angel. I later studied harp with her throughout high school. It was her teaching that inspired me to pursue harp in college. Miss Knauss touched many lives, and I'm so thankful to have had her in mine. Candace Rosaza, I came to you at 10 years old. You were my inspiration to be a better musician. I loved you dearly throughout my life, and I took you out for your birthday dinners until you were 102 years old. However, I must always thank you for being a piano teacher, and currently I teach 45 kids per week thanks to you. You will go down in history for being a grand lady, a class act, and the best teacher I will have ever known. And from Ron Dempke, the conductor of the Allentown Band, a perfect example of one of my most touching memories would be a performance by Dorothy Knauss and she was always very dedicated. We scheduled a duet for her and oboist Tommy Hine. They often did duets together. She couldn't play that day. Her hands just weren't strong enough. So we rescheduled the performance, and she did a solo with Tommy during our annual holiday concert. That was a special moment because you knew her time in the band was not going to go on any longer. In fact, it was the last time she played with us, and she died 2 years later at the age of 103.
Oh, wow.
Excuse me. Dorothy's attention to proper appearance. In her 90s, she had rotator cuff surgery, and instead of using a standard sling, she used a lovely large scarf to support her arm to avoid drawing any attention to any infirmity. In fact, she never let anyone know her age until she reached 100. She used to say, "Let them guess." It was a big mystery, and people would always say, "How old is she?" She spoke the Pennsylvania German dialect, but didn't let many people know that. I was most surprised and inspired when at age 95 she hired painters to paint the trim on her house. She was fair, honest, efficient, respected, and always paid her bills as soon as they arrived. She would also deliver her homemade cookies to friends who were patients in nursing homes. And these are just other memberships that she won to and awards that she received. In 2004, she received the Arts Ovation Award from the City of Allentown for her lifelong contribution to the performing arts. And that was the year Anne received an award too. During their 41 years of marriage, Jack and Dottie enjoyed many worldwide travels together, especially on the Royal Viking cruise ship. After Jack died in 1990, Lois Eisenhardt became her traveling companion, and Dorothy would make a point of hearing the harpist to perform nightly at the ship's midnight lounge and would request her favorite pieces. She attended many National American Harp Society meetings and also traveled to Europe with the Allentown Band. And there we are at some harp meetings years ago. Dorothy took only a daily vitamin and avoided doctors unless absolutely necessary. The only reason Dorothy stopped playing the harp was because of the skin on her hands was too fragile from psoriasis. Otherwise, she could keep playing. I'm convinced that her positive attitude, humor, love of beauty, and continuous exposure to the fine arts in many ways contributed to her long, healthful life. Lois made sure that she had very good care during her final days. Here are a few photos of her 100th, 101st, and 102nd birthdays. The harp that graced her roof for so many years is now located in her neighbor John's garden across the street. I will forever be grateful for the excellent and patient training that Ms. Knauss provided. She was a good friend, mentor, and role model. Dorothy was present at many of the significant events in my life. She referred me to play at a Renaissance dinner where I met my future husband, Ted. Attended my college graduation and would come to hear me perform at the Sunday brunch at the George Washington Motor Lodge. Remember? Most of all, she encouraged me to grow professionally in many directions, including performing, writing, publishing, composing, developing the field of harp therapy, opening a harp and guitar store, and teaching. She attended many of my students' annual holiday concerts and was delighted that her teaching would be passed on to future generations. Despite Dorothy's gentle demeanor, she was a trendsetter, independent, pragmatic, and strong, and she maintained a very large circle of friends, students, caretakers, and admirers to the end of her very long life. So any questions or comments? Any memories that you'd like to share about Dorothy?
Sarajane, how long did she have that particular harp?
I think she got that harp probably when she was in college. So that probably is in the early 1920s. She was born in 1906. So.
It's a beauty.
Yeah. we are, and here's the star, Dorothy Knauss, and we're going to take her for a This Is Your Life ride through Macungie. What do you have to say?
How about that? That goes a long way back. Right where you go in where the columns are, that's all there was here. And this was fields, just fields here. And this was my parents' home right here.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And that was my grandmother's house right next door where I said the Hubers lived.
Oh, so this is your house here,
Uh-huh.
and your grandmother's
The one in the back
was that one. Ah,
That's a big house.
so 129.
129 Church Street. And you know, 129 Hemingway Street was my address in Boston.
Okay, we're now on Main Street, and this house was where you had your first music lesson
That's correct.
with Alice Shingler, you said,
My aunt.
and it was your father's sister.
Right.
Did your father play any instruments?
Played trombone.
Yeah, you said there was a Macungie band or something,
There still is.
and he played in that. Is that right?
Oh, he sure did.
And what else do you remember?
Well, now down farther is where my grandfather had his home and office.
Which one was that?
Down on the other side.
Okay.
Where it says Debbie's Store.
Uh-huh.
That was my grandfather's office.
Uh-huh.
And where it says MEA's Groceries, that was their home.
Oh, I
They
see.
lived right next to the office.
And what was his office? He was the
He was a,
squire, did you say?
yes, he was the squire, magistrate, whatever you want to call him.
And now this was Macungie Print Shop over here, and that was your uncle,
Yes, that was my grandfather's brother.
your grandfather's brother. And you said his
Oscar.
initials were OP,
O.P.
and your grandfather was O.J.
O.J.
Knauss.
Oliver and Oscar.
Your great-grandparents must like the initial O.
I guess.
Where did they come from?
Right here.
They lived in Macungie too. Okay, so these were your cousins, the Newmoyers. And your grandfather put this,
He bought the
That's
whole
the-
plot. My grandfather and this uncle and John down there were the ones that had the Rims underwear factory.
oh, I see. Here's Jack's. Oh, you have your headstone already with the harp on. Look at that.
That's what I wanted you to see, too.
Oh my.
Isn't that pretty?
Yeah, it sure
they made a
is.
beautiful job of it.
Oh, it really is. Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to have it like that with the birth date, just the date of death.
Just the date of death.
Yep. Let them guess.
That's the secret you take with you.
That's right. Now, this is my father and my
Nelson?
mother, and that was my grandfather who started the business.
And they made underwear for Sears. So.
But they had other customers also, but Sears was the biggest customer. Oh, they had many. That was quite a big thing. And that was my grandmother there, Ida. Ida L. Williams, when I did.
So the Weeders owned this building, and it was a box factory.
Yes, that's
Paper
right.
boxes.
Way back, that's
Yeah.
an addition at the back there. It's quite large.
Oh, this was the underwear factory then.
That was a John Rems and Sons underwear factory. Ladies' underwear.
Dorothy Knauss takes a front row seat for all of the band's West Park concerts. But she's not just a dedicated fan, she's also an Allentown band alum.
I would do it all over again if I could.
Sometimes referred to as the Lady of the Harp, Dorothy began playing with the band in 1932.
If you were to look up the word lady in the dictionary, I think Dorothy's photo would be right next to it. She's just a wonderful gal.
For 67 years, she shared the stage with numerous guest soloists and conductors. But one thing certainly set her apart during that time.
For 44 years, I was the only lady in the band.
In those days, only men could play in professional bands, But former conductor Burt Myers had close ties with a well-known American composer named John Philip Sousa. Sousa's band included a female harpist, and Myers wanted to emulate Sousa's successful techniques. It wasn't long before Dorothy's name was added to the roster.
They all treated me with great respect, and we had a lot of fun.
Her elegance made quite a stir with audience members. For every performance, she dazzled onlookers with lavish gowns and intricate hairstyles.
A lot of people have said to me since many, many times, we so look forward to what would you wear at the next concert.
But her keen fashion sense wasn't keeping her in the spotlight. Dorothy's musical talent paved the way for many exciting adventures with the Allentown Band.
Well, I guess every time that I had a solo to play, it was special to me.
I do a lot of work with harp therapy, where we play in hospitals for patients, and I publish a journal called the Harp Therapy Journal, and it networks harpists around the world that use the harp in therapeutic setting. I'm also a psychologist, and I use the harp in my practice. I have a large harp just like this that has a pickup on the inside, and it's amplified. It amplifies the harp into a chair that has speakers in it, and it's called vibroacoustic harp therapy. So the patient lays in the chair, and I play, and you feel the vibrations in your body. It's very powerful for pain management and relaxation. And so there are all different applications that we're using now with harp. But harp traditionally has been an instrument used for inducing sleep, relaxing people, easier breathing, regulating heart rates, and that's what we do in hospital settings. They use smaller harps in the hospitals the harps aren't amplified and just play at the bedside. Okay, so as I said, one of the genres that Dorothy liked was she liked some pop music, and she encouraged us to play different types of things. So you might recognize this one.
And here's the star, Dorothy Knauss, and we're going to take her for This Is Your Life Ride to Macungie. What do you have to say?
How about that? That goes a long way back. Right where you go in where the columns are, that's all there was here. And this was fields, just fields here. And this was my parents' home right here.
This one? Oh.
And that was my grandmother's house right next door where I said the Hebrews lived.
Oh, so this is your house here, and your grandmother's
The one in the back
was that one. Ah,
That's a big house.
so 129.
129 Church Street. And you know, 129 Hemingway Street was my address in Boston.
Okay, we're now on Main Street, and this house was where you had your first music lesson?
That's correct.
With Alice Shingler, you said?
My aunt.
And it was your father's sister.
Right.
Did your father play any instruments?
Played trombone.
Yeah, you said there was a Macungie band or something,
It still is.
and he played in that, is that right?
Oh, he sure did.
And what else do you remember?
Well, now down farther is where my grandfather had his home and office.
Which one is that?
Down on the other side.
Okay.
Where it says Debbie's Store. That was my grandfather's office. And where it says MEA's Groceries, that was their home.
Oh, I
He
see.
lived right next to the office.
And what was his office? He was the
He was
squire, did you say?
yes, he was the squire, magistrate, whatever you want to call him.
And now this was Macungie Print Shop over here, and that was your uncle,
Yes, that was my grandfather's brother.
your grandfather's brother. And you said his
Oscar.
initials were OP,
OP.
and your grandfather was OJ.
OJ.
Knauss.
Oliver and Oscar.
Your great-grandparents must like the initial O.
I guess.
Where did they come from?
Right here.
They lived in Macungie too. Okay, so these were your cousins, the Newmoyers. And your grandfather put this,
He bought the
That's
whole
the-
plot. My grandfather and this uncle and John down there were the ones that had the Rims underwear factory.
oh, I see. Here's Jack. Oh, you have your headstone already with the harp on. Look at that.
That's what I wanted you to see.
Oh my.
Isn't that pretty?
Yeah, it sure
Did a
is.
beautiful job of it.
Oh, it really is. Yeah.
Now I'm not going to have it like that with the birth date, just the date of death.
Just the date of death.
Yep. Let him guess.
That's the secret you take with you.
That's right. Now this is my father and my mother, and that was my grandfather who started the business.
And they made underwear for Sears, so.
But they had other customers also, but Sears was the biggest customer. Oh, they had many. That was quite a big thing. And that was my grandmother there, Ida. Ida L. Williams, when I did.
So the Weeders owned this building, and it was a box factory.
Yes, that's
Paper
right.
boxes.
Way back, that's an addition at the back there. It's quite large.
Oh, this was the underwear factory then.
That was a John Rams and Sons underwear factory. Ladies' underwear.
Dorothy Knauss takes a front row seat for all of the band's West Park concerts. But she's not just a dedicated fan, she's also an Allentown Band alum.
I would do it all over again if I could.
Sometimes referred to as the Lady of the Harp, Dorothy began playing with the band in 1932.
If you were to look up the word lady in the dictionary, I think Dorothy's photo would be right next to it. She's just a wonderful gal.
For 67 years, she shared the stage with numerous guest soloists and conductors. But one thing certainly set her apart during that time.
For 44 years, I was the only lady in the band.
In those days, only men could play in professional bands, But former conductor Burt Myers had close ties with a well-known American composer named John Philip Sousa. Sousa's band included a female harpist, and Myers wanted to emulate Sousa's successful techniques. It wasn't long before Dorothy's name was added to the roster.
They all treated me with great respect, and we had a lot of fun.
Her elegance made quite a stir with audience members. For every performance, she dazzled onlookers with lavish gowns and intricate hairstyles.
A lot of people have said to me since many, many times, we so looked forward to what would you wear at the next concert.
But her keen fashion sense wasn't keeping her in the spotlight. Dorothy's musical talent paved the way for many exciting adventures with the Allentown Band.
Well, I guess every time that I had a solo to play, it was special to me.